I know some of you in here are English students, or maybe most of you, and you're certainly doing you're studying When Ground Doves Fly, and you have already, some of you have put in your requests, which I hope to be able to fulfill. So let's start. Since we are in a school situation, I thought I would start with one called Common Entrance. That's an experience you've all gone through, and I'm sure you wouldn't like to have to repeat again. But this time, this is a kind of a light-hearted approach, and it has to do with my niece and her very different approach to the Common Entrance exam. Common Entrance. Her father walks away, stifling thoughts of homicide. Her mother sits dejected. Last week, Daniil knew everything. Today, Daniil knows nothing, or so they think. And while her peers wait anxiously for places in top schools, dream of prizes for best student, being prefect or head girl or athlete of the year, she makes no such assumptions. Auntie, I don't care which school, as long as they don't wear brown shoes. All her life she's worn them, she complains. She simply cannot wear brown shoes again. While the world rocks with the weight of urgent decisions, reels from the shock of disappointed hope, frustrated yearning, sad despair, one girl walks free of presumption, clear-eyed and even-keeled. Another one here is called Word. I love teaching with a passion, and I still meet some people who say to me that, they express their gratitude for, the effort I put into teaching them. But of all the, if you might say, successes I have had, and I'm sure they were not always successes, life being what it is, but of all of them, there is one young man whom I taught to read. He had a very unfortunate background, and at 20-something, 30-something I think it was, he was still having a difficulty. And this poem was written at the beginning of that teaching experience. Now, as teachers, we always learn to teach, if you're going to teach students, start with what they know. So he was a carpenter. So I thought I would choose some words to start him with. And I thought I would choose a small word, like fix. You had to fix things, right? So this is what happened. Word. He trusted me to break the word, crack each segment open until the mystery expired. Not so this morning. He stared bewildered at the board, then back at me. I never thought that word could be so small. F-I-X, he mused. This word's so small. How could his daily toil of hammer, saw, and nails, an old lady's reckoning of last month's window against the patching of her roof this week? How could her life of sacrifice and his of labor, sweat, and boiling sun be totaled up in this small word? You all get it? What do you think his problem was? What was going on there? Somebody explain. Tell me. I know that you all know. Tell me. Go ahead. You know. I know that you all know. What's the answer? What did he assume? He assumed that what? The bigger the task, then the bigger the word should be. You see, we take a lot for granted because we could read. So you could imagine, I am not making a joke at the guy at all. But could you imagine if he had a word like mosquito? What do you think he would expect? That would be So we take a lot for granted because we can read and, but it's amazing, when people can't, what they see on that page or what the assumptions are, you would be completely shocked. to discover that. So that itself was a learning experience for me. The other one, this is the last one that has to do with school. And this is actually dedicated to 3 students who may thought, we don't have any more light in here. Huh? Okay. All right, that's okay. This is a little long, this is a bit longer. It's called Lesson. And it's actually dedicated to 3 of my students, 3 students whom I taught. Their names are Melanie, Stacy Ann, and Shaniqua. All right, I'll just try and get by as best I can. What had happened was that a tutor her grandmother had died, so these 3 students came to that funeral. I was there, and this is how the poem went. Not all noise and adolescent posturing, or sentences derailed between full stops, or the eternal enmity of subject and verb. 3 students have come to throw roses on the grave of an old woman they never knew. Enough for them that she was Mam's grandmother, whom she loved. One in black trousers and long-sleeved shirt takes seriously, by her expression, this burden of sympathy. The other, demure, holds her skirt close, steps up to the grave, throws her red rose. The last, so deeply pensive, tears running. This strange parody. Young students months away from graduation stand in silence, while just across from them a group all dressed in purple caps and gowns burst into song, a slab of stone their platform, and bridging these 2, an open grave. A flick of a page and Ophelia's casket closes. Blanche stays forever locked in old world fantasies. Marx and all theorists vanish to shelf or book bag. But this September afternoon, between sun and shadow, the sound of stones falling on a wooden coffin, a teacher is undone by grief for grandmother, who was to her, as theirs to them, no doubt, an anchor and a certain solace. I placed an arm around the young girl's shoulders and asked, half guessing, "Who are you remembering?" Between her sobs, she answers, "My boyfriend. They killed him in June." And suddenly the evening slams hard against the peaceful passing of an old woman and all other assumptions. Yes, face it, this is their world of anger, knives, and guns, the bloody graffiti on walls and pavements. Old age, a peaceful death, grandmother's God ensuring justice against the wicked. Not for them, not for them. And what that poem there is marking, of course, is a very sad situation we have nowadays, which I don't really need to expand on, the violence that is now, that we hear so much of. And while I'm assuming that this girl might be remembering her grandmother, whom she loved as well, what's happening is that she's remembering an actual murder of her boyfriend. And is it that we are now in an age where we can't take old age for granted, and we can't take the old way of thinking that people will wait for God's justice? What they prefer to do, apparently, is to take what? Justice in their own hands. So, of course, I pray that that will not continue to be the case. All right. A student, or maybe more than one of you, asked me to read that poem, "I Do Not Know My Father." And I'm going to read that and 2 others. And I don't know how many of you listen to brass tacks on Sunday. You should be at church. But anyway, I wasn't either. So I turned it on at some point. And they were discussing the whole matter of the absent father. That theme is unfortunately a very common one in the Caribbean. It's not the only place where we have it, but it is a very, very common one. I am usually a little bit reluctant to read this because What I don't want is to awaken students' pain or anger or anything like that. So let me start off by saying, I had that experience myself, but there is always forgiveness. Forgiveness is necessary, and if anybody wants to come and talk to me about that afterward, feel free. But yes, there is the situation of the absent father, but there is healing and there is forgiveness. You understand that? Good. I want to make sure you understand that. So the first one I'm reading, do you know that years ago there was oh good. Oh, before I go to that one, oh yeah. All right, let me start that one. Do you know how the postman used to come around years ago? They come around now on motorcycles. Years ago, you know how they came around? On bicycles. Yeah, they actually came around on bicycles. And you knew that because you used to hear the bicycle bell ringing, all right? So, here it is. It's called Bell. In a small country village, a little girl listens for the sound of a bicycle bell. It's the postman arriving with his bag of letters, and while he approaches, nothing else matters but the sound of that bicycle bell. Lord Jesus, she prays, please let him stop here. He's right by the neighbor, he's near with the sound of his bicycle bell. She knows that her mother is listening too, looking for an envelope with red, white, and blue at the sound of the bicycle bell. But the postman hops on his bicycle once more. No sound of his bell as he rides past their door. No sound of his bicycle bell. She thinks of her father who's over and away. He's too far to notice, too distant to care for the sound of the bicycle bell. She will wait many evenings by the tamarind tree, then dry all her tears so no one will see that she's waited in vain again and again for the sound of the bicycle bell. The sound of the bicycle bell. I do not know my father. For those who asked, I do not know my father. I do not know my father. I keep wanting to meet my father. I do not know who he is. I know of the smooth, smart talking, impossible dreamer my mother speaks about. I remember a man planing wood in the backyard, where I longed to play in the shavings that fell, who hopped on his bicycle and left. Those days when anger spewed out from my mother and ran like lava through the house and all around it. I know the man I saw years after, who tried to fit words into pictures of the past and did not know the pictures, memories, words were warped out of all meaning, frames twisted out of joint. I heard him speak of the glory of God and the power of angels and the saving grace that kept him through the long years of cold rooms and alien faces. But I do not know my father. I do not know what is behind the skilled words and sometimes loud and reckless laughter, time whittled to a prop to fit the stage until my 2-week holiday is over. I had no clues when goodbye came to help me gauge the truth of his embrace, but I look back and dare to think that it was grief I saw etched on his face. So the poem ends. Clearly the speaker knows the father. It's just that she doesn't know him to really understand who he is. And certainly by the end of the poem, there's the possible. What do you think it means? I saw grief etched on his face. She's what? She's at least open to the possibility that he might be suffering as well. There could be another side to the story. Okay? There could be another side. All right, let me read something a little bit more cheerful. Where what on? Oh, I'm not. That one is not too cheerful. Does anybody have any requests from the ones you're reading? Grandmother's crosses. How many of you here have your grandmother still? Even one, all grandmothers. Great. I have 3 grandchildren myself, and whom I love dearly. And you know that the grandmother has always played a very important, most of the time. We have some modern grandmothers now that are a little bit different, but sorry. Okay. We have some grandmothers now, some modern grandmothers who are very different, but my grandmother, I thank God for her. Because clearly the father is not there. The grandmother plays her role. And I celebrate. I just, by the way, submitted another collection of poems to my publisher. And it's called Country Woman. And my daughter said to me, and I told her the title, said, but mommy, that sounds, you see a woman with a hoe and a fork and all this kind of thing. I said, but that's exactly the kind of woman I want to celebrate. They're the ones who helped to build this country. And if you have grandmothers who work the fields or whatever, don't be ashamed of them. They were, it was an honest living, and they showed us how to work hard and make sacrifices. Grandmother's crosses. My grandmother's hands were full of crosses. Oh, by the way, you know what that concept is? People used to look in your hands and see all those marks, and they say, boy, your hands full of crosses. And they used to tell you, by the number of marks in your hand, they'll probably say, boy, you're going to have a hard life, or, that kind of thing. My grandmother's hands were full of crosses, her 7 grandchildren, to be exact. Our mother had migrated. Gran never flinched, just waited for the morning cloud to break. Then she was planting, digging yams, potatoes, eddos, increased peas, so 7 mouths would not go hungry. She knew the secrets of the woods, and she followed, trekking through a nearby gully, picking Circe bush, bitter as gall to cure colds, bush ball, vermifuge to purge out the system, gully root to soothe woman pain. She took her produce to town on the 6 o'clock bus, selling among the sweat and market stench, then waited on the bus stand, basket on head, to come home. And I, in high school uniform, you know it by heart, waited, standing at a distance, pleats and young pride stiffened, worn with the starch of cassava she had squeezed, grated, peeled with her own hands. Then shame gave way to love, and I scrambled for a seat and yelled for Gran to come so she could rest her weary feet. By lamplight, she talked of her young girl days. She had picked pond grass for 10 cents a day, gathered dry sticks to make cooking fire, ran from the overseer who felt that his hire included the right to interfere with her. We knew of her conversion, kneeling, weeping in a mission hall when Jesus came and never left her heart. In time, my grandmother shared the triumph of the cross, each one of the 7, this one teaching, others working in the government, going to university. They all do good with the help of the Lord. I'm too proud of all that picked me. Today, I looked at the cross leading my grandmother's casket and thought of those that she had carried in her hands. Please, Granny, turn this call backward. Mark your turpentine cross at the door. Turn my blue nightgown inside out. Chant a psalm, a prayer to protect me from the lurking heart man, from high-gridden night, the wrong turning at crossroads. That this young man, the crucifer, now moving down the aisle, should bear this cross with such indifferent calm, perhaps was right. folding her thumb inside her palm before she died. Gran had relinquished all. They say I have my grandmother's hands. I shape my crosses in words. I'll read a few more. It's okay. Figure it out. All right, now, you know that when we talk about our history, we know that we came out of a history of what? Slavery. We know that, okay? And the plantation is a very, very real part of our history. The plantation is still there. So I'm going to read about 3 poems, maybe 2, because the time is going, maybe 2. One is called, yes, you see I'm trying, sometimes you have to, yeah, okay. This one is called Estate, and this is a very, okay, Estate. As if the limestone buildings still standing, mostly covered by moss and mildew, had already returned to the earth, so deep seemed their covenant of silence. You'd never think the noise of donkey carts and lorries hauling sugar canes once filled this yard, and the smell of syrup and molasses sweetened the nostrils for miles around. And you'd never know of the white man whose skin became too white for the great house. They built him a cottage over the nearby pond where lilies stopped growing. And only the boastful bamboos witnessed black women brought under the threatening dark to open their flesh to his leprous seed. Did the wise womb refuse the damned seed, or blood resist this dread contamination? Or was the lazaretto in the end the home for wretched souls like these? Now, only black and white geese floating on this muddy pond, dipping for worms. I'm not going to read any more of those poems. They are rather strong. But the one thing I'll say is, remember, I want you young girls to remember the time when the women who came before you had to go through a lot, okay? So I would always tell once a teacher, always a teacher. I would always tell my students, you have to work hard. Remember the sacrifices that were made for you. These were women who had no choice but to go along with whatever the master wanted or the overseer. You have choices, okay? You do. All right, now to some happier poems. Really, really happier ones. I'm going to read, how much time do I have? Just maybe 5 more minutes? Or we're out? About 5 minutes, okay. Now, I love Barbados with a passion. So I'm going to read this one called We Island People. Before that, I'm going to read one called Director, which I thought very interesting. You know, poetry is everywhere. Now, I used to pass, we pass by people whom we consider to be mad people, right? But you know what? Sometimes you can learn some things if you watch them. Director. He's standing at the junction again this morning, directing the traffic. Both arms moving in every and sometimes opposite directions. Left, right, up, down, forward, backward, sideways, crossways, in circular motion. This man must surely be out of his mind. Or maybe he's the trickster, disruptor, mediator, testing the skill, the readiness of those arriving at an intersection. Or the philosopher, whose arms are the pages we should look into. Lives seemingly moving forward but slipping backward or simply stalled. Thoughts out of control, too far left or right of ideology, religion, the internal duel that throws us front to back of ourselves, fearing the shadow, not daring to trust the light. Pause, traveler, at the crossroads, where interchange is possible. The exchange of seeming insanity for clearer vision. when the map of your journey starts to unfold and your dead ends turn into thresholds. Another time I'll explain a little bit more of that. Final poem, we island people. We who have few caves, hills, mountains in which to hide, shut in by sea and ocean, no piece of rock or earth to join us to another place. Walk far enough, nothing but water everywhere, everywhere. And so we circle inward, become our own caves, relish the darkness, unmask, slough off the outward skin, feel the damp air cool the burn of public gaze, the too close scrutiny that claims the right to know, to gauge the best or worst of our intentions. We are also hills and even mountains. We have crossed oceans, known the thrust and heave that pushed out islands, formed this rock that we call home. Out of the fault of our history, cracks, fissures, smoldering debris, out of the incrustations of ancestral memory, we build until we rise above the surface of the earth. We are island people. We walk and talk the rhythms of seas and oceans. We flash a smile, you see the white of reefs. The vibrancy of bougainvillea, brilliance of the red flamboyant are in our laughter. Our sighing is the wind in casuarinas. The salt of the sea is in our tears. Our weeping is the cry of children drowned in the Middle Passage, a people severed from the motherland with suffering as their daily bread. What would happen? We are island people. Withhold your bounty, we will not die. Not now. Not now when we have learned to trace the drying stream to the head of the spring, or tap the clouds until they pour down rain. Not now. Not when we know that while our tongues are quick to shape the syllables of foreign nations, the song of the heart will always find its roots, its rhythms, the syncopation of its truest joys and sorrows, here in these caves, hills, and mountains, these streams and rivers, seas and oceans, running deep inside the veins, the blood of these our island people. All right, that's it for now. I know. Thank you very much.